What's poppin', gamers and philosophers? What's up, gamers? Guys, make sure to subscribe, like, comment if you like this type of video. We're going to be doing more stuff like this in the future. But I wanted to talk about today. I want to talk about objectivity, input, output. If you've ever studied math, or you know what a function is, or even if you're familiar with these terms, very important. Okay, learn this. And then I wanted to talk about a little bit about results and how it's related, the nature of results related to this stuff. So I was making these fleets on Twitter, these like live tweets or whatever. You like tweet them out, they got 24 hours. It's pretty cool, actually. So I was making these fleets. I was talking about objectivity. I was talking about in the world of natural gameplay, things are objective, generally, or at least we're trying to keep it objective here. And I was thinking, it's not just natural gameplay world. It's actually gameplay philosophy. All the philosophy and gameplay, I'm really trying to keep it as objective as possible. I think that's why natural gameplay is subjective. It's because we keep it objective. Of course, we create something that is objective, right? Isn't that interesting? And that's actually where we're getting with input and output. And this is big. So if you don't subscribe to this theory, I don't know what I don't know what you're subscribing to, but the argument is that, effectively life is a function. Effectively, you're a function. You operate like a function. There's input and there's output. You're trying to get an output, which is a result. Trying to win. You need to change the input, right? How do you change a function? You have a function, f of x equals x plus 1, right? And you're trying to get an output. You're trying to generate an output. Let's say it's 69. Kidding, but let's say you're trying to generate like an output of 100. You see how do you generate that, right? You need to get the input correctly, plug it to the function, and then you get the output. Now in simple functions, you can work backwards and be like, 100, well, 1 is 99, obviously it's 99. Complex functions, it doesn't work like that. In complex functions, you actually need to solve the problem. And life is a complex function, or a lot of these gameplay problems are complex. It's basically a complex function. Some gameplay problems are very simple functions, and people do work backwards. They come to a solution, and they're like, well, great, it worked, problem solved. But that's what this is what creates ego, and this creates worse gameplay overall. So you need to fundamentally solve these functions through input, not through output, but solve them through input. And that's kind of argument, input output theory regarding the gameplay in a simple explanation. But it's pretty big, because let's say you're trying to get a speedrun time, or you're trying to win a tournament, and you're not winning, or you don't get the speedrun time, or you don't have the speedrun time. Basically, you need to get a better result, or a different result, really. Try to get a different result, and how do you get that different result? Well, you can solve it through input or solve it through output. People who try to solve it through output, is they do a speedrun, then they look at the end of their speedrun and be like, well, I choked here, I choked here, and I choked here. Okay, well, if I don't choke on those spots, I'll get my right output, right? Nope, that's solving through output. That creates ego. That's not how you solve a function, especially a complex function. And that's what you have here. Solving it through input, you'd have to be more critical and be more, it's a more complex process. Plus, it's directly related to the gameplay, right? You got to look at what happened. Look at what went wrong. Look at the what you could do differently, and is what you're doing differently even a good thing, right? That's why I like natural gameplay so much. When I really naturalize my gameplay and I go into a speedrun, I'll do the run. I choke the run somewhere. I'm just like, I don't care, whatever. Do another run. Because what happens on this run, and the next run, the next run, the next run, I'm constantly learning new things. I'm constantly learning these little details. These little details go back into my run, and I choke less. I choke less spots because I'm getting better at the game, like daily, every single run. And now let's say it's a really obvious choke, and you're like, wow, I should have done this. Clearly, this is a better solution. I clearly should have done this. That's not solving through output, or if that is solving through output, that's fine. It's not a problem. Again, very simple functions you can solve through output. If you do happen to solve it through output, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think learning from mistakes is a bad thing. It's just that people sometimes try to force themselves to learn from mistakes, and they're not really learning from mistakes. They're just going in this circle, and they're not going anywhere. There's no learning, right? So I think it's kind of confusing there, but try to learn from your mistakes, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. Like, try to get your input better, try to get your base gameplay better, try to get your understanding of the game better, and then learn better strategies, right? If you make a mistake, it's really easy to learn a better strategy. That's kind of the bright side, but what matters is the input, right? That really is what matters. Now, here's something big about input-output theory. This is really big, guys. Make sure to subscribe. If you like this, if you want to win right now, you're going to get back in there and start practicing differently, practicing smarter, practicing to win. Subscribe right now, okay, guys? And make sure to note this down. If you do something that's logically consistent, it's logically coherent, if you create something like that, and then you develop gameplay based on that, you're going to develop gameplay that's logically consistent and is logically cogent. That's big. That's a big deal, because what is gameplay? It's a function, right? And better gameplay produces a better relative outcome. Now, we're looking at video games worlds, which I love the world of video games, because you have objective results. Results are objective, and they have objective merit as well, especially in the speedrunning world, which is why speedrunning is the only game that somebody could have created gameplay philosophy, because it's so basic, it's so simple to look at, it's so objective, right? You have objective standards in speedrunning, so I just love that. But back to my point in the input-output argument. If you create something that is like an argument, or let's say you create an idea that's logically consistent, you actually get, and then you develop gameplay based on that, you will get logically consistent gameplay, which is an output, right? You get logically consistent output. Now, there's a lot going on here, gamers. There's a lot going on here. I just love this stuff. There's a lot going on here, because number one, this is why you need to apply natural gameplay to itself, right? Because what's happening here? We're looking at several different things being a result here. Several different things being output here. The gameplay is an output, right? Because you do something and then something happens, that's output. We're also looking at mentality as output. Mentality is now suddenly output. And mentality creates gameplay, which is also output. And the gameplay creates results, which is output. Isn't that interesting, right? A lot of this is output. Now, I think maybe you could say some of it's input, but let's just stick to what we have right here. So a lot of these things are output, which people are not commonly, when I look at gameplay, and especially Melee, this is pervasive in the Smash community, and it's also a big deal in the speedrunning community. People look at mentality as an input, and they say, I need a better mentality, I'm going to practice mentality. They go into a game and like, wow, I never got mad, therefore I have a good mentality, right? Yikes, dude. Never do that. Never do that, guys. That's logically inconsistent, because you just treated mentality as an input, not an output. It's an output. It's objectively an output in all situations. You just treated it as an input, right? And you argued that because you had the mentality, therefore you get a better mentality, right? You have a better mentality. But what you got was a result. And you're trying to argue that because you got a result, therefore your input's better, right? Because you got an output, you actually have a different input. And that doesn't logically make any sense. That's not logically consistent. This is why you need to apply natural gameplay to itself, right, gamers? Because the act of me arguing that, well, the act of you applying, the act of you the act of you solving the equation based on output, right? Is itself a result. Does that make sense? That's a result in itself. So the problem is much deeper. It's much deeper than that. That's why you need something like natural gameplay, which applies to itself on all circumstances. Because that way you can actually go back to the origin and then start solving these problems. And then you'll actually solve this problem without directly thinking about this problem too much. I think you should think about this problem a lot. If you like mentality, if you like Smash, if you like winning, you want to get better, you want to challenge yourself, you have to think about this issue. You have to consider this issue where mentality is a result. What is ego? Ego is when you solve a problem through its output. So if you put in the output into the input, into the function, you don't get the same output, right? We all know that. So why are people saying, oh, I didn't choke this run, therefore I'm going to have a better output in the future? That's what they did. They took an output, they put in the input as a function, and then they get the wrong output in the future. So their gameplay is not good, or the mentality is not good, because of strategy. It's not because of willpower. It's not because of genius. It's not luck. It's literally strategy. It's simple strategy that anybody can change or anybody can fix. But most people don't understand it, and they're not addressing these simple things. I mean, this is easy to do. So what you need to do is change your strategy. Start solving this problem through input. Start thinking more critically about the game. Start thinking, why do you need a better mentality? Why do you actually need a better mentality? What is a better mentality, right? Be objective here. None of this is subjectivity. I never want to see or hear subjective gameplay arguments. It will never help you out. Never do that ever. You need objective gameplay arguments. You need objective things, and there's a lot of clear and easy objective things that I created in speedrunning, and I developed a good mentality as a result. Number one. So people try to PB in speedrunning, right? Well, look at this argument. Let's say you play a game for 2 years straight, which is a frequent or it's a common thing. Let's say you get PBA, right? 1 month later, you get PBB, which is better than PBA. 1 month later, you get PBC, which is actually better than A and B, right? And then we look at value in speedrunning. What is the objective value in speedrunning, right? It's your best PB. It's your best run ever finished. Averages don't matter. They're irrelevant. People think averages matter. Nope. They have no value anywhere, right? If people had leaderboards with averages, I would say they have value, but averages don't have value in speedrunning. It's only outliers. We're gonna get to that in a second here. So if A is better than B and B is better than C, and then you go 2 years in the future, suddenly A and B don't matter. They're not relevant, right? So this is something that it brings up a lot of it brings up a lot of discussion. There's a lot of discussion that goes on. So one thing we can say for certain, if you beat your PB at any point, your PB doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. And to me, that means that number one, it's more important to PB than to get a good PB. Getting a good PB is not valuable because if you ever beat that PB, and if you play the game, you're likely to beat your PB. Or we could say if you ever do beat your PB, PB is not relevant. So it doesn't matter if it's a good PB. You can't have a good PB. That doesn't matter. It's completely trivial. The other thing that I just was talking about a second ago, it's big and that people are doing wrong, trying to get average times, or they're trying to get more consistent, or they're trying to get more average times, or they're trying to get like better. I don't know. What are you a speedrunner, guys? Are you a Smash player? Are you a speedrunner? Tell me the things that you're trying to do better in a speedrun that are not relevant, because I know people are doing this. Being consistent is cool in a speedrun, but unless it's getting you better times, and I mean like a better peak time, it's totally irrelevant. Now, it can get you better peak time if your game needs RNG. You need to get lucky, and you're not getting enough runs to get to the point where you get lucky, right? So you want to be more consistent to get more runs to the RNG element so that you can get more runs to the end of the game, and you'll get a better PB. I agree with that. I would say you do need to be more consistent in that situation. That's oftentimes not the case, and oftentimes what people are not trying to do. The whole thing about getting better average time, totally irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Averages are silly too, because we all learned in math class there's 3 different averages. I mean, what kind of average? A mean average? Why is a mean average relevant? Now, let's say you're trying to do a tournament. You're trying to go for a tournament in speedrunning. You're like, one of these like mini tournaments people run. And you're like, well, I want to be more consistent, or I want better averages for this tournament. But there's still issues with this. Averages are output, right? We all know averages are output. Well, output doesn't affect your input. Output has no bearing on your input at all. So if you get better averages, you're not a better player, right? I mean, this is really what I've been trying to say the past 14 minutes, is that if you get better averages, that's an output. Your outputs don't affect your input. These things are separate. And this is what natural gameplay, like philosophically, this is why I like natural gameplay, because it's easy to say it's just looking at gameplay naturally. Philosophically, what natural gameplay is it's that idea, but like applied to itself, right? To infinity. And so what happens is you create the ultimate solution to gameplay, which is recreatability. But it's not quite recreatability, and I always say it's just recreatability. And I can guarantee you, if you can make your gameplay more recreatable, you'll get better gameplay, almost every player. But it's not quite recreatability, because It's being able to look at gameplay from a natural perspective and being able to get better at like if you can't look at gameplay from a natural perspective, your gameplay's not naturalized, right? To the end, because then you're using output to solve input, and natural gameplay is fundamentally when you use input to solve input. So you have to learn the input, right? You have to learn the input. It's the only way it makes any sense. And the input fundamentally, even more fundamentally, is logic, input, output. It's just simple logic, how logic works, and then looking at gameplay through that, right? And then you're going to realize, oh shit, natural gameplay is stronger than any other type of gameplay. And one reason I did that is like the theoretical arguments. I mean, I have all these arguments. Like one of my my best arguments was theoretical gameplay does not actually fundamentally exist. Oh, hold up. It doesn't exist at all. Theoretical gameplay only exists as a theoretical. It doesn't actually exist in real time, or it exists as an idea, right? But the gameplay doesn't actually exist. Like if it never happens, it doesn't exist, right? It doesn't like a unicorn. I mean. Everybody will agree that a unicorn is not a real thing. It's a fairy tale. It's an imagination. So it exists as a fairy tale. So then why do people think theoretical gameplay exists as anything other than a fairy tale? I mean, that just blows my mind. Because I've had arguments, like hour-long arguments with people that like, they're trying to argue that these fairy tale gameplay exists. And I'm like, no, it exists in the real world. And I'm like, no, it only exists as a fairy tale. This exists in your mind. And then when you look at animals don't exist. And like, I know that the church heads, they'll disagree with me, but animals don't exist. And we have data and evidence for this. Animals don't exist as a snap and then you created something cool. They don't exist as a figment of imagination. They don't exist as something that people thought was cool. And then they applied it, right? They exist due to an extremely rigorous trial and error schema that they had to go through over millennia, or millions of years, billions of years even, and that's how these animals were created. Well, I'm trying to argue the same thing with gameplay, right? Because why were these animals why were these animals created? Because they had traits that were valuable. It's very similar with gameplay, so that's just a big deal. But yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit more to the whole input output thing. The whole point of this video, guys. This can change your life, seriously. If you create a logical and consistent argument and then you develop gameplay based on the argument, you're going to get logical and consistent gameplay that's going to make you succeed. If you create an inconsistent or an illogical argument, you're going to get inconsistent or illogical gameplay that's going to make you fail. That's a fundamental truth. Fundamental truth. Okay? It's extremely important. What that means is when you decide that you need better average, you've just developed, you're developing gameplay based on the idea that you need better averages when you don't need better averages, because they don't matter. You're getting worse gameplay off of that. It's the same thing with people who say, I need to, I don't know, I need to get less nervous. Oh, I need to be less nervous. How many times have you heard, I played Smash since 2005. How many times have I heard somebody say, I need to stop being nervous or I need to get less nervous? I can't tell you. 1,000 times maybe I've heard people say that. At least 100 different Smashers. At least. I can't tell you. Probably 500 individual people have told me that. But it's not true. It's a wrong statement. And people are developing gameplay based on this idea that's wrong. It's actually a wrong statement because the people who are winning Smash tournaments still get nervous. So no, you don't need to get less nervous. That's not a real factor of gameplay. It actually doesn't matter in reality. It doesn't exist. This idea that you don't get nervous and then you win doesn't exist. Now, it exists when your opponent is way worse than you and you can't possibly lose, but that hardly matters. Okay, that hardly counts. That's an ego thing. That's just an ego thing. When you look at any tier of gameplay, all tiers, the worst level and the highest level, they all get nervous. And it's provable. I mean, go watch the highest level of Melee when there's stakes and the players are somewhat evenly matched, right? The match matters. They'll get nervous. Absolutely. Absolutely. Every single time. Every single time. So they have to get nervous. Actually, in the natural world, they have to get nervous. You have to get nervous. If you want to win, you have to be nervous. Wow, I just created a logically true argument, and maybe not logically true, but this is an argument that has zero counter arguments. There's no situation where the players are not getting nervous. The winning player is not getting nervous unless he outperforms the other player. So maybe you could argue that you either have to get nervous or you have to be so much better than second place that there's no contest. Maybe that's what you could argue, because that's true of all situations. If it's true of all situations, even though it's not logically true, this is going to be true in all situations, right? So therefore, it's going to be true. Realistically, it's going to be true in the future situations as well. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's like a miracle chance it doesn't, but we're using our brain here. And this is something I do like about philosophy here, because it's gameplay philosophy, it's practical philosophy. Practically, I think it's worth the risk. That's not objectively, logically true in a vacuum to say that every single situation in gameplay, in order to win, you have to either be nervous or you have to be so much better than your opponent that it doesn't matter. I think it's actually fair to say, assuming the match has stakes and on some level you want to win, I think it's actually fair to say, because it's if it's not true in every situation, it's true in nearly every situation. I mean, it's just how it is. So my point with that is that, and see, you know what? I mean, honestly, maybe that's not a true statement. Like, okay, well, it's not logically a true statement. Let's not create gameplay off that then. That's not a logically true statement. Let's not create gameplay off that. I think it's fair. My point is that people are creating gameplay off this idea that they don't want to be nervous, but it's just not. It doesn't work like that. I mean, people always get nervous. So I actually do create a lot of gameplay based on the idea that I will get nervous. Like, how about that? It's like, realistically, I'm going to get nervous. So I develop a lot of my gameplay. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be nervous. Let's develop gameplay on it. Actually, the only difference I see between top players and bottom players regarding nerves is that the top players have developed strategies that work through the nerves, natural strategies, right? Recreatable strategies. They've developed natural, recreatable strategies that work through the nerves, and they're good at executing, and they execute them. The bottom players have no idea what they're doing, and they've developed these like theoretical strategies that don't work. And so instead of getting the strategy in their mind, they get reality, which is just a bunch of spaghetti, and then they fail. And this is a deep, complex look at gameplay that never ends, because the top players will get more nervous than they expect, and then they start doing that spaghetti. So a truly genius player, I think, would be one step ahead of their opponent in that regard, and that's to be so sick to think about. That's just so cool. I love to see it when players are like that. But hope this video is helpful for you guys. Okay, let me know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Tell me, I really want you guys to tell me, what are some other logically inconsistent things you're doing, you're developing gameplay from, that's giving you a logically inconsistent output?